What up, guys? Welcome to this episode of the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Number, who cares, right? Because it's a random number. It's just lots of numbers. It's like like the Joe Rogan podcast is up to like 2000 something. You're
I
like,
love it.
like, why are you even counting at that
I
point?
think it's fun.
I don't know.
I-
I guess it gives you like something to go off of.
well,
right?
yeah, you kind of like get I think you get like the order of stuff, I guess.
But it's like, oh man, did you listen to podcast number 7,000? No, like it's like always like, did you listen to that podcast with that one guy?
Yeah.
Like even like with us, I was talking to the guys that listen to our podcast. It's like they'll send me a message. It's like, hey man, with that podcast when you had so and so on the podcast, or that podcast where you guys were talking about such and such.
Yeah.
No one has ever said, hey man, I really like podcast number 142.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It's 362 in case you're
how you guys doing? Today we're going to talk about some old man jiu-jitsu. So, or old lady jiu-jitsu, whatever you wish. We'll call it old grappler, but I'll refer to old man because it's coming from a lot of my experience. I'm going to talk to you guys about, this is something I've been kind of excited about because, I experienced what I think a lot of us do at some point. Maybe if you're a little bit older, and when I say older, I mean like north of 30, right? Let's see if you relate to this. As I got older, let's go back a little bit. When I was younger, I would remember being in a situation where I remember talking to like the older guys that were 30, 35, 40, 45, so and so. And they would always tell me, man, when you're older, you just feel different. Body feels different. And I remember them saying that. And I always kind of like shrugged it off. Like, nah, man, like I feel great. I'm going to take care of my body. I'm going to eat right, stretch, lift weights, live a healthy lifestyle, and I'll be fine. Right. Because I was, 18 years old. I didn't have a fully formed prefrontal cortex, as most males do not. And I was, essentially functionally stupid, which is what most of us as guys are, before like our mid 20s, where our brain fully forms. I don't know if you guys knew that, right? Like it's interesting, like women, their brains fully form at a younger age than men's do, which makes complete sense when you think about it. And like men's prefrontal cortex, the thing that gives you executive function and like the sort of, maybe I shouldn't do this, doesn't form until like usually in our 20s. And so again, start training, whatever else. And then later on, as I got older, I remember that the words of my older training partners came back to haunt me. Because as I started hitting different intervals of age, 30, 35, 40, their words came back to laugh at me. Like, oh, you're not going to feel different, huh? Your body's going to feel different. Because my body started to feel like a car. Whereas like, you have that nice new car or newish car and it drives smooth. It's not making any weird noises. Just everything just works. And then my body turned into this thing where it was like, sometimes the check engine light pops on, the doors start rattling, had to get, this replaced, got to check the oil every few days. We get quirks. And so with that said, I started having to change my jiu-jitsu around because the old style that I was playing, it still works, but I was running into the situation, especially when I was going with the young guys, the young athletic dudes that are in the gym, and like, man, I've got to change things around because I can't roll with these guys and be competitive and effective if I'm going to continue to roll like this. And I don't know about you guys, but that kind of sucks. Like it sucks to lose your step simply because you had to blow out another set of birthday candles.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that said, we're going to get into some ideas on finding your old grappler game, some ideas and maybe things that you can go with. I'm going to tell you the story about how I sort of developed my sort of guard passing top pressure game that allows me to be effective on the mats, put the brakes on people in gi and no gi, slow the action down so I don't have to work as hard, and be a game that I can use from now until I just get old. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. And so we'll talk about how to do that, how I did it, and hopefully this will help you guys. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping us make this podcast happen and helping all of us old grapplers come together here today. Athletic. When it's spelled athletic, it's ATHLETHC, because it is a microdosed THC product. And so basically the dudes at Athletic, if you're watching the podcast video here, you guys see the little box there, they came up with these mints. They're, microdosed THC mints, and they have some CBD and everything else in there. And the idea behind them is that you can get some of the benefits without a lot of the negative side effects. And so, there's certain benefits that things like THC and CBD and things like that can have. But, if anybody's ever had like a too much of a cookie or something, right? Like sometimes that doesn't go the way you might like, right? You have negative side effects. But these specific products, these mints and their products at the athletic, are designed for things like, again, recovery, getting into a flow state, trying to support that, or even your training. I've used them off and on. I don't like using them every day. That's me. I'm one of those guys that's like, I don't want to use anything every day because I want to be like, I have control of it versus it having control of me, even like coffee and stuff. Sometimes I'll just, I'm going to drink green tea today, or I'm not going to have anything today just because I want to exercise control. But I've used them and there's no big like lag or brain fog. You get into this like good state or more relaxed mindset versus, being completely off your rocker because you're high as a kite. It's not that kind of thing. I heard one of their things they were talking about is kind of like your everyday mint. You can use these for just normal situations. And I really did I felt like I get something out of it when I use them and I go in and train and just I'm there to kind of just play around a little bit. I think it does help support that. At least I felt like it does. You can try it and see how it works for you. Again, that's always my encouragement to you guys. I'm not really dogmatically attached to anything really. I'm always like changing things up, trying new things. And so I encourage you to do the same, try things out for yourself and see how they work. If you guys want to check out any of their products, you can go to their website at ATHLETHC Athletic. And when you go to their website, use the promo code Chewjitsu10 for 10% off the order and see what kind of effects you get from the mints and the products that they have on their website. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Epic Roll. EpicRollBJJ.com is the website. Again, they make a lot of cool products, everything jiu-jitsu related that you might need: gis, rash guards, shorts, t-shirts, joggers, fanny packs, you name it, they got it. I'm a big fan of the products there, and that's why I get my rash guards and shorts made through them. We just completed the jiu-jitsu order. If you guys ordered any of the rash guards or shorts, they will be sent to you in the near future as they're getting produced. But again, I really like their stuff. They do a really good job, high quality stuff, great customer service. And if you guys want to check out any of their products to see what they have, go to their website at epicrollbjj.com. And then the promo code is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order at checkout. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Charlotte's Web. They are one of the premier CBD companies out there. They were one of the OGs that came out to, start pushing the CBD and offering it to people and letting them try it. They also have a lot of other products now as well. So, not just the CBD and the CBN products and the cannabinoid products. They also have things like functional mushroom products such as reishi and lion's mane to help you get desired effects. And again, with the supplements, if you go to their website and just kind of browse around, I encourage you to just kind of see something that maybe catches your eye. The products that I use from them on a regular basis, I like the CBN gummies for sleeping. And I like the lion's mane for focus. I tend to like those two. Those are two of my go-tos. And then I will mix the CBD periodically in and out. I don't know. Maybe it's just my effect from things. Same thing kind of with like the athletic products. Sometimes things chill me out a little bit too much and I lose that kind of, I know this sounds weird, right?
Yeah.
There's I was talking to someone about this the other day. We're all wound up a little differently, right? I'm wound pretty tight. I lean towards I will go into like an anxiety or panic attack versus before I'll go into like depression.
Yeah.
So I'm wound that way.
I got you.
And so I like that energy a bit because it's like I get things done. I'm moving, I'm shaking. I'm like, let's go. Whereas sometimes, when I've used products, sometimes they chill me out a little bit too much. And I'm like, I don't want to be chill right now. I got things to do. And so I use CBD at different periods, but sometimes I find that it makes me a little too relaxed for my own liking. But if you're someone who wants to relax a little bit, maybe you should try it. And like during periods where I don't have a lot going on, I definitely like it. Like Christmas time and the holidays, I like doing it because it's like just a naturally slower time.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I notice sometimes if I'm having trouble just relaxing, I feel like it helps with stress management, and then I'll start taking it then. But again, try it out for yourself, see what you think. If you go to their website at charlottesweb.com, the promo code is Chewjitsu30 for 30% off the order. Also, if you guys want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. When you go there, we have a bunch of different perks that you get for becoming a Patreon member. And again, it's a very inexpensive price. It supports the podcast that you're listening to week in, week out. And you get some extras for it. If you want to see what those extras are and you want to see the different perks you get, go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And last but not least, guys, if you want to get my daily email, where I send out everything from books I'm reading to training ideas to diet ideas to lifting ideas to whatever I think might be entertaining or useful to you, and give away exclusive offers to you directly through there, because like I give discounts through that particular the email that I don't give anywhere else. You can check that out by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join. Now, when you join up, you'll get something I think super important, which is I created an ebook and a video that comes along with it, which is the idea of focused jiu-jitsu. It's a focused jiu-jitsu ebook. And the idea is very simple. It's basically just helping you get some ideas to focus your training in. If you're an older grappler, or if you're someone who cannot train every single day, which is the majority of people, then you really want to be intentional with your training. Most people go into the gym haphazardly and just sort of go about their day and just let it happen, right? Nothing wrong with that. And sometimes in the beginning too, you have to just absorb things. But after you start getting at least some ideas to what you're doing, you want to take some agency over what's going on. And you would like to put some intention to your training. And you can do this whether your coach does it intentionally, or if you just go into your open roles and you have a very clear goal as to what you want. And for a lot of people who find that they tend to like get into periods of stagnation or like almost like regression, one of the best things you can do is have a very clear goal as to what you're chasing. Very much like in life, right? If you don't have a goal, you feel like you're just like in fog. You don't know where you can move a lot. You can be very active. You can be very busy, but you don't actually get anything done. And so the same thing can happen in jiu-jitsu. You can train really hard. You can get after it. You can train a lot, but then at the same time, not really know if you're making any progress because you don't have a focus. The book will give you some ideas. The video will give you some ideas on how to have that focus. If you want to get it, my website at chewjitsu.net/join. So with all that stuff out of the way, let's get into the reason why you guys came here to talk about old man games. So let's get into it. So as I talked about before, as I got older, my body started to feel different, and I felt this need to develop an old man game. Because I had the situation where I came up in the old days, 20 something years ago, and everybody back then just trained really, really hard. They never really adapted to their age, and they all got broke. Not all of them, but many of them. I watched many of them get very injured and sometimes lose the ability to train altogether. And they're not old men. They're in like they're like 50s.
Mhm.
Like still could train if they wanted to, but they just trained so hard. They ran their bodies too hard for too long. And, they never adapted their game to it. Then I watched some of the other guys that I knew that were old, and I watched how they adapted, and they're still able to train. And they also don't get injured as much. They haven't had as many surgeries. And again, sort of being able to sort of take some of the lessons from both sides of that, right? Having that contrast. And so I started to look at the writing on the wall. I'm getting exhausted. I'm getting beat up, trying to roll like a young man against young men. So I'm like, well, I got to shift gears. And so I was like, let's start to change this around and find a game that's going to be better for me. Guard passing was one of my favorite things in jiu-jitsu. It's one of my best things in jiu-jitsu. It's also one of the areas that was exhausting me the most. So that's where I started. And the first question I asked myself to find this game that I was going to develop was, where do I move naturally when I'm tired? Like when I get tired, where do I go? Right. And that's kind of where I began. And so I started looking at a position that I immediately move to anytime I'm tired. Here's a great example of it. In 2021, I competed at the Nogi Worlds less than a month after COVID. So I had COVID and I go compete, and my lungs were hot garbage. Now, look, I'm not one of those crazy people that thinks like COVID was like the worst thing ever, and I never drove in my car with a mask on or anything nuts like that. But I definitely had some effects from it. And like, I remember I bounced back from COVID, like the initial symptoms, like within a couple of days, felt fine. And then as soon as I came back to roll, and like after I was out of my little quarantine period at the time, I came back to roll, and I was like, I'm out of breath. And I remember I did not feel 100% with my lungs for about 60 plus days, almost 90 days. And I was just like, I just would get winded. And I remember I competed at the Nogi Worlds. And I remember one of the guys, that one of our members, he's a doctor. I remember talking to him. I was like, hey man, like, you think I'm all right? Is this safe? He's like, yeah, you should be fine. Just, whatever. He gave me some recommendations. And then he was watching the matches on Flow when I was competing, and he was sending me text messages like, how you feeling, man? You look tired of that match, because I scored a takedown and immediately I was like on top of this guy breathing heavy. And we're like a minute into the match. Now, luckily, I ended up scoring, or I ended up winning a bronze medal that year. Once the matches, won a bronze medal. And I did so because I got the position immediately to like half guard chest to chest. That's immediately where I went to, because it was like, that was the position where anytime I trained or competed and I was tired, that's where I wanted to go to. Even, were you at my like 31st birthday where I rolled with everybody?
I probably was there. I don't recall though.
Well, so
I might have been there.
So 30th, they Shark Tanked me. 31, I came in and I was like, I don't want to get Shark Tanked. What I'll do this year is I'll just roll with everybody and I'll just submit everybody, and that'll be that. I don't know why that sounded like a good idea, because I ended up rolling for 75 minutes and I submitted everybody from black belts down to like the blue belts. And like,
did you start with the black belts or the white belts?
You start with the black belts. Yeah, dude, I'm not going to start with those white belts, because then by the time I get to black belts, I'll be exhausted. I won't be able to submit them. So I started with like Chad and stuff and was like working with the guys. Yeah. And again, going back to that, what did I do? Chest to chest. Immediately went to chest. I was like, I wasn't playing with the standing passing, wasn't going to do all this misdirection, chest to chest. And so that was one of the first things that I did, was ask myself that question, like, hey, where do I move when I get tired? And that can be a good sort of starting point if you're trying to figure out what your game is. And again, you might be limited. Maybe you're really new, and that's okay. But this should be a question maybe you come back and ask yourself periods of time. Like, hey, like when I'm training or when I'm rolling, where do I go when I get tired? That's a really good starting point as far as trying to figure out what game is going to suit you. And when I say you as an older grappler.
Okay. So here's a follow-up. Was there a specific moment, or was there a set of circumstance or instances that occurred that you were like, I need to start changing up my game? Because it wasn't like you could still hang. It was just having a harder time. But was there like, all right, I need to start doing this? And it's different for everybody. Some people maybe at 30, some people maybe at 40. Who knows? Like, when was it for you? Like, was there like a point that you decided, I need to start transitioning my game after having this game since you were 18 years old, essentially playing a certain style of jiu-jitsu? Now you're starting to transition to a different style.
I think it was like, I noticed it a little bit at 35 and 36.
What did you notice?
Huh?
What did you notice?
I just noticed I got more tired. Right. And it's like the tired felt different. It's one thing to feel a little winded and you just kind of catch your breath and you're fine. But I started to feel like tired, like wore out from playing around with this style. Cause me, like I'd love to move.
Yeah.
And so just trying to move all the time. And so it's like all of a sudden I started to like feel like not huffing and puffing, not just heart rate, but like fatigued from it, where I'm like, oh man, like I'm really tired, or I'd have to breathe really heavy.
Yeah.
And I felt like very winded from it. Like, and not in a good way, not like, ooh, that was a good workout. Like I feel exhausted from doing this. And so I started seeing that happen. I'm like, man, this isn't like, I guess this is what they mean when you say you feel different, right? You feel a little different. Your body feels different. It doesn't respond the same way. Recovery is not what it used to be, right? So I couldn't like from round to round, I couldn't recover as fast as I used to. And then if I like slid a little bit with my cardio, even just a little bit, boom, I'm in the hole. Whereas like when I was younger, it's like, didn't matter, and you think about it. And then I was like wearing my heart rate monitor and I noticed that my heart rate would just spike up super high in those engagements. And then again, I'm going with a younger person at times. And a lot of times I was rolling with these young guys. And that's really like who I like this style for the most. Cause when I'm rolling with like the older guys that are same age, it's like they're older. Like we're more similar. It's a little bit easier. But when I'm rolling with like the young guys, that's when I'm like, I got to slow things down. Rolling with like Brandon, at times like Charlie, and some of these guys are a little bit younger than me by 10 to 15 years. And even some of the other younger guys that I've rolled with since then, like I've got to slow things down. When I was going to seminars, I remember, I'll go to seminar, I rolled with like people for like, 30 straight people without rest. Like that game of bouncing around, I just didn't have that. And so I just started to notice it. But after that like period when I was coming back from COVID, I was like, man, like this is exhausting. And as I was coming back from it, I was like, I just need to, I just, it sort of thought of, I was like, I just need to start shifting my game a little bit and have to slow things down a little bit, you know. And I knew that it was going to happen at some point because, you know, you're going to have to change your game as you get older. And I was like, well, I guess this is as good as time in it as any. But like the writing was on the wall, it was starting to show itself. And it was like, eventually I'm going to have to shift gears. And so around like 36, I really started to change the way that I played my guard passing, especially if I was trying to limit the movement or stay reserved, and not just go super fast. And kind of going back to the story earlier, 2021, I took third, went back the next year with, you know, in better shape, with my game intact, with that game, and took, you know, first place using that, a first and a third place using that style of guard passing.
Yeah. I mean, like, so for you being such an experienced grappler, you know, like you think, when did you start becoming more effective, like actually using that game to your advantage? Where, I mean, you probably already had that in your arsenal, but like starting to transition, when was it becoming like a bigger part? Did it take 6 months, a year, a couple of years, but it started to kind of to transition from this?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you still have those other elements.
I do.
But you have like, maybe I used this quicker style of guard passing for 50% of the time. And then I'm using, or you maybe even started to say, like you had mentioned, somebody similar in age, I'm going to use more of like, it's not going to be as much of a trouble versus like a younger person. I would go kind of toe to toe with them, and then I'm going to slow it down. Now I'm starting to slow it down.
So when I started like looking at it, I was like, okay, chest to chest, this is where I need to go. And I start studying, because the chest to chest position, I mean, it's been used like since I started jiu-jitsu. Chest to chest half guard has been around. It's nothing new, right? But it's been one of the, you know, it's one of those fundamental techniques, positions, areas of focus for guard passing that has been around since I began in 2003. So it's a evergreen, timeless jiu-jitsu position. I was like, okay, let's work here, because obviously this is a good place to put my eggs, as far as put it in this basket. So when I start playing it, I started really focusing on how people used it. And it's a very slow position. You're not going super fast. You can try to go hard with cut throughs. I don't like cut throughs very much because it puts a lot of torque in the knees. I'm old. I don't want to put the torque on my knees. I've never talked to someone who was like a really big cut through player who hadn't had their knee twisted by it. I was like, I don't want to deal with the knee twist, right? And so I started getting into the position, learn how people use it. And then so in the beginning, I really never tried to pass. Because what you noticed was when they were using the chest to chest position, it was so slow and methodical. And it was this constant, like, it's almost like they would take a little ground, give a little ground, take a little ground, give a little ground, take more ground. And as this person is fighting from this position of disadvantage, they're getting exhausted, where the person on top would just kind of consistently go forward and forward. And so for me in the beginning, the way that I implemented it was breaking it down into sort of like, I don't know if you want to call it micro positions, but just little small chunks where it would be something such as, all right, this person wants to play from this particular guard. I'm going to force them into half guard, right? Because again, this is one of the big myths in jiu-jitsu, is that like you have to have like a bazillion different styles of like, you like for instance, like there's a lot of different types of guards, right? And so there's this sort of thought that you have to have all these different types of specific guard passes for every type of guard you run into. And I would tell you that for the most part, you can sort of bypass all that, and you can simply find a lot of different ways to force people into your realm of competency, because then you're in control, you're in the driver's seat, and they're reacting to you, which again puts you in a situation where you're using less energy than them because you're more efficient. And so again, all right, this guy wants to play this type of guy, I'm forcing him into half guard. Or if the person was already playing half guard, well, then I wanted to get into a situation where there's several different situations where you can go to like almost like a slightly squatting position, or you're driving you through, and you start laying on them with slightly uneven pressure, and you're forcing them to have to push. And if I could get the person to push with their arms to frame against me, I would start just seeing how long I could control that particular spot where I would just lay on them. Because I'm like, okay, this is how I'm going to wear this person down, is just being heavy on them. And then it worked from that to, okay, now I'm going to try to get to chest every time I roll. And when I get to the chest to chest, I'm not even going to try to pass. I'm going to try to control it for as long as possible, because the longer that person is supporting my weight, the longer their breathing is impaired, the better off I am, the less energy they have. And so it was basically building up like this. And so what I was doing was trying to learn how to control someone with these different specific points. And it's interesting because a lot of times in jiu-jitsu, we get really, when you think of dominant position and control, you get really focused on, oh, side control, mount, back mount, right? Guard. Oh, I've controlled the person. But there's a lot of positions that will not award you any points in a competition where you have fantastic control of people and you can wear them down. And so that's kind of where I started. My starting off point was basically looking at it. Here's where I'm trying to get to. Here's the end goal. And then started working backwards. Like, how am I going to get there? And then essentially plotting out a course for, okay, I'm going to work here. Once I can get here, then I'm going to work here. And once I can get there, then I'm going to work here. And during my open roles and training, I wouldn't even try to really pass half the time. It would basically just be control the person. And it would be like a 6-minute round of me basically pummeling in and laying on this person. They'd be exhausted afterwards where I wasn't going as hard.
Talk about uneven pressure. What do you mean by that?
So here's an idea. And, this is like, if you're one of those people that wants to be heavier on top, whether you're small or bigger, most people, they have 2 ways that maybe they'll apply pressure. They either squeeze with their arms, right? Which is a bad idea. You squeeze with your arms, you're just going to wear your arms out. So yeah, you might apply more pressure, but then as soon as you try to move, your arms are going to be completely fried. The other way is they go to the buffet line, they just get heavier, right? So you just gain some weight. Again, maybe not the best idea. But then there's this idea that I think of as uneven pressure. And so basically when you're laying on someone on top of them, as an example, a lot of people, especially early on, they don't get very intentional about where they lay their pressure. This is why you'll get say a blue belt who doesn't feel very heavy. You can take a well-experienced black belt who weighs the exact same as them, and they will feel like a ton of bricks, right? You can take like a 160-pound guy who feels like 260 pounds, feels amazingly heavy. It's like, why is that? Because they're applying pressure unevenly across the body. So as an example, let's say we're in side control. There shouldn't be heavy pressure on your knees, right? Because if my knees are on the mat and my pressure is sort of evenly spread across, then what's that going to do? That means that there's a lot of weight on the mat. There's not a lot of weight in this person. Right. But if I want to be heavy, I want to apply pressure maybe in the shoulder and the face or the chest where I'm trying to pin this person. Same thing with like chest to chest half guard. I'm going to pin the person where my chest is driving into them. I have good shoulder pressure and I'm positioned just the way where I'm not going to get off balance, but I'm very light on the mat, heavier on them. One of my buddies, JT Torres, when the guys came to the guard passing seminar that he did back last March, one of the things everybody said who felt it was like, oh my God, I almost wanted to tap to the pressure.
Yeah.
And it's because he's applying pressure unevenly. He's not just spreading his body and plopping down. He has key points where he wants to pressure in to control someone. And in his case, he was using the shoulder into the face, because if my face is pinned, well, then I'm not turning towards you, right? So that's a big deal. And so a lot of people they flop into positions, they lay there, they squeeze a little bit. That's how they apply pressure. But what you have to learn how to do is you have to learn how to apply pressure unevenly. So something you can do if you're on top and you want to be heavier, like instantly, is let's say you're sitting in side control. Mount, doesn't matter. Think about, where do I feel pressure? Where do I feel like my body is pressing down? Is it into the person or is it into the mats? If it's into the mats, you need to adjust. We need to have it heavier into the person in most cases. There's always exceptions to the rule, but you tend to want to have it into the person. And so that's what I mean by uneven pressure. That's a big concept. Here's one more sort of idea. Let's say that we're in a position where we're passing and we feel this person framing against us. Maybe their hands are pushing, maybe their frames are pushing, whatever. Well, do I want to be evenly spread out? No. I'm going to push more weight into those hands and those arms. Why? Because that means they're going to have to push harder. Yeah. That's going to wear their arms out. And again, if I'm like in a almost standing position, or if maybe I'm just dropping down into a real crouch position, I can put a massive amount of pressure by simply pressing off my feet into those frames and those hands. And a lot of times, like when I was starting to use this style of guard passing, right, this old man style of guard passing, I would press into it. And it would be just that. Like when we would get done, people were like, oh my God, my freaking triceps are so tired. My arms are so tired. I'm exhausted from having to push you away for 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. And so again, thinking about this, whether you're trying to pin the person or you're trying to make them exert more energy, you do that by being very focused and very specific and intentional with your pressure on top.
Okay. So what do you recommend, like, as far as somebody's a newer grappler, even a little more experienced, like how do you start the implementation process? Like how do you close? Because a lot of this stuff is based on closing the distance, pressure, close proximity, not allowing movement. So how do you start to implement, closing the distance? Like what do you like to work on? I mean, are you focusing on like swimming the underhooks or one overhook, one underhook? How are you trying to get it to close the distance on them?
Well, I mean, depends. I mean, first off, we can shove ourselves into a half guard. That's the first start, whether they with a knee shield.
Sure.
Shove them into a knee shield half guard. Most people, even if you're new, you can do that, right? You can step off to the side, drop into half guard. Almost everybody can do that. That's your starting point, right? We're like, again, if you're older, do what you want. But again, we probably don't want to spend a ton of time going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with like standing guard passing, using misdirection where, there's nothing wrong with standing passing, by the way, and I use it. But if you're in a situation where you're trying to conserve some energy, standing guard passing is more expensive. You use a lot more energy having to run around. So we want to get into a position where we're in a little bit lower. We can start to press in. And for a new person, it can simply just be as simple as getting down to a knee shield and start forcing into half guard. I think, to me, like I'm a simple guy. Like I like finding and breaking things down as simple as possible. And so it's really not all that complicated. If I said to you, for an instance, and these are the kind of weird games that I'll play in my head. Let's say you're a parent. If I said to you, hey, your child's life is on the line and they'll only be saved if you get your chest on top of their chest, could you do it? You'd probably figure out a damn way to do it, right? But what happens is a lot of times we go in and we go, oh, well, their guards, I can't do it. No, you can do it. You just got to figure it out. And you have to think, like, don't think in jiu-jitsu terms. Thinking just, I got to get my chest to touch their chest. That's it. And then you start playing around and figuring things out. We get locked into what's the specific technique that I need to know. No, just get in there chest to chest. Now, there are specific things that we can do to bypass that. But as far as starting the process off, you just get into a half guard. That's it. And then from there, you are now in a position where you're connected to the person and you can drive into them and make them exert pressure. From the beginning, that said, now again, you do have to have some things to control their half guard because people that know how to play half guard can be very, very dangerous. But when you start to learn it, it becomes a super effective position. And then you can start learning all that. There's hand pummeling, there's like hand fighting and control and everything else that all exists there.
How are you conserving your energy when you get in those positions? I mean, obviously they're carrying your weight, but is there anything you're doing? For me, one thing that pops in is like, I'm just focusing on my breathing, getting my breathing more regulated. Is there anything like you're focusing on in particular? Are you like, all right, I'm going to stay here for a little bit, or I'm going to get my breath under control and then I'm ready to go? Is there a time that's like, okay, I know how long I'm going to stay here or how long? Or the other question is, when do you know when you're ready to move? Like, is there something you're seeing from your opponent?
So here's an example. So a couple of years ago, this is how I kind of knew I was on to something special, like as far as the game goes. I was rolling with one of my toughest training partners, someone who has an amazing guard position. And when we go, we're both usually, especially because usually I can only pass his guard with a crazy scramble, at least at this time. And usually that scramble would like have my heart rate spiking. That was the only way I could get around. I had to basically use horsepower to do it. So he was one of my guys. He is one of my like litmus tests. Like, how good is this position?
Yeah.
Right. Especially because he's a great half guard player. And so we start playing. And I remember after it was over, we both had heart rate monitors. And after this roll, I'd only passed his guard once, but I did so with a sort of, this pacing. My heart rate monitor showed my heart rate was around in like the 120s and 130s. His was up in the 150s, 60s, up in the high 160s. So to give you context to that, basically I'm jogging, he's running, right? And again, he's working a lot harder than I am, and I'm not doing a whole lot. And so for me, what I'm doing in those positions, like one of my big things was with him, was I would get into the position and I was forcing myself not to overexert myself. So I didn't want to get into the crazy scramble. So for instance, I would give up position before I would start trying to go through the crazy scramble. I'd give up a little position, make him fight out of it, push and use his energy just to come right back into it. And that's another thing too, is like when I'm playing that position, one of the ways that I don't exert too much pressure or too much energy is I'll give a little ground. Right. And there's ways that you can do it very intentionally so that like you give ground, but you make the person overexpose themselves, which is kind of cool. But, you just give a little ground instead of like, what do people do? Like, someone's like framing away from them and they'll squeeze as hard as they can and they try to force in the position. I'm like, no, you go ahead and I'll just let the person, but I'll make them have to exert force and I lay on them with my body weight. And as they're pushing out of it, they're using a lot of energy. They're fighting from a position of positional disadvantage. And then when they get back, let's say we do this back and forth. I take a little ground, they get it back. I take it back, they take it back. We go back and forth. Every time we have that exchange, they get more tired than me. And so the way that I think about it is like if we were like a 2D fighting game, their energy bar is going way down fast. Mine's it's going down, of course, but it's at a slower pace.
Yeah.
Right. And again, was it like this in the very beginning? No, it's like I had obviously had to develop the style there. But as I got more and more knowledgeable and I had the feeling of how this whole thing works, and like anything else, you start to notice like the rhythms and the what people are going to do. I use less and less energy because now it's like every time they're reacting to me, I've already felt these reactions. And because I'm playing in like a very specific position, there's only so many things they're going to do. And so again, then I get into my little realm of competence where I'm more efficient than the other person. And typically with the style of play is the person's shoulders are on the mat with their shoulders pinned down on the mat. I mean, they're to get out of that, they're going to have to exert a lot of energy. They're not going to be able to use like technique necessarily. I mean, you will use technique, but it's a lot of muscle. And it's kind of like the old Sal Hubera quote: if you're late, you muscle. If you muscle, you get tired. If you're tired, you die. So like basically you're putting the person where they're late because you're more efficient. You know the ins and the outs. It's like having a roadmap in front of you where I know all the ins and the outs. And this is what every really good jiu-jitsu practitioner eventually does. They develop a area where they know the layout. They know all the side roads, they know the main roads, they know the back ways, everything else. So that this way, every time you stop them somewhere, you put up the roadblock, they go, well, if you do this, then I'm going to do this. And they will do this whether they explicitly lay it out with like some sort of schematic. I was talking about this in one of my videos recently. People sometimes like, we talked about this on the podcast, right? Like where people sometimes feel bad if they don't, express their jiu-jitsu like a college professor. But even on like a very intuitive level, your body, you will figure this thing out where you start to do something, it's working, and then all of a sudden it's not working, and then you have to adjust. And you will develop this if this, then that sort of system to your jiu-jitsu, just by and large, right? And so, when you start to go into one area of the game over and over again, you start to do that. And what I like about the half guard, the chest half guard, is when you get their shoulders pinned, they're just so limited in what they can do. And it removes a lot of the movement that would be available to them if they were younger by, trying to play like a big open guard position. This is something that I've noticed where like even rolling with some of my like Brandon, when he would come in and train, he would be ready to like play guard. And then I remember like we were rolling one day, the last time he came in, and we're rolling, and the first roll he drops to guard and plays guard. And I'm putting this pressure on him. And about half, maybe a little way through, he like fights just to get to standing. He's like, screw that. He's like, God, that's awful. Like, I don't want to be there anymore. Right. Which is I want, because he's a young, athletic, super tough kid. And then afterwards he wanted to roll again. And then we were having a battle for takedowns and everything else. And it was a slog. Right. Now I was whooped afterwards. Because if you I wanted to play takedowns with him, and then you play takedowns with him, it's like it's tough. It's a rough go. But again, those are some of the ideas there. Like it's just it's a strong style, strong position.
Okay. So what do you are you looking for shoulders on the mat? Is that primarily, or them collapsing? What are you looking for from your opponent or your training partner that tells you they've kind of conceded the position?
You'll feel it. So typically shoulders on the mat is what I'm looking for. If I can get the person's shoulders on the mat in half guard, they're done. I mean, like that's it. Like, I mean, granted, I'm not saying they're done because they could fight back out of it. But if you want to think about this, half guard is one of the best passing positions. It's also one of the best sweeping positions. What determines that is if their shoulders on the bottom are flat or not. If the person on the bottom, if he's on his side, if she's on her side, then they can play a very effective sweeping game, right? Z guard, low half guards, they can shoot into other stuff, right? But if that person is flat, that becomes like guard passing city, right? So the game is the shoulders. And so for me, if I'm on top, my whole goal is just how can I get their shoulders to the ground? That's all I'm trying to do. And they will fight out of it. And there's very specific points that you can push on. Like, let's say if they're really fighting to not go to the ground, you can start to put pressure on against their shoulders in different ways to make them have to fight out of it, where they use a ton of energy with their core and their back and everything else just to try to stay up. Meanwhile, you're just kind of laying there on them and you're doing very little. And, even like this happened at like Nogi Worlds last year. I was up against a tough competitor, and basically it was a it's a 5-minute match, I guess is what they had us at. And I scored at the very end. I started scoring a bunch of points at the very end. But before that, it was just like this constant pummeling. And this guy's like, it started off, he's really good fighting the frames like he should, everything else. But then over the course of this, slowly getting more and more tired. Then the frames are going away. Then it's like giving up double underhooks,
right?
Cross faces, the whole things. And again, you're chipping away at people with that. And again, fatigue does this to everybody, myself included, right? You start to not do the things you need to do because you're exhausted. And so it's really about that. It's a slow game where you're, and this is, I think, what's ideal for like older grapplers is finding these types of games where you're moving at a slow, methodical pace, but you're creating dominant control. And really the idea behind it, and this is sort of one of my sort of mantras as an older grappler now, is cook, then kill.
Right.
So like my jiu-jitsu, like I still have the ability to go a little faster, but my sort of thought process with jiu-jitsu is like, I'm going to be a slow cooker, not a microwave. So takes a little longer, but it'll get there. So, it'll tenderize them up a little bit, and then we're ready to go, so that's kind of my approach to is cook, then kill. And as you get into these positions, many of you guys have felt this. You don't always have a clear, distinct, this is the reason, this is how I know. You will feel the person's energy. We know when someone's tired. You start to all of a sudden you feel you're pushing against you, and all of a sudden you feel their arms collapse. They're getting tired. Or, I will literally like lay on someone and I will turn my head so that I can basically feel their breathing and take in note of their heart rate and their breathing speed, and if like I notice, they're tired, or if I feel that heart rate, like they're heavy, they're breathing heavy and their heart rate's racing, they're tired. Or if I get down there and I notice they're still breathing through their nose, I'm like, oh, they've got energy left.
Yeah.
So it's like you can read into those things. Those are some things like it's kind of maybe weird to some, but like if you want to know how the machine's going, like it would be like looking at a car. How do you know if it's revved up? You'd look at the tachometer. How do you know if a human's revved up? Listen to their heart. Like see what it's doing. What's their breathing pattern like? Yep. It'll give you some clues as to how much that person is exerting themselves.
You know what? I actually listen if they make noise, like if they grunt.
Oh yeah.
I listen for that kind of stuff. They start really like first, they're breathing through their nose, kind of controlled, and still giving me a good amount of resistance. And all of a sudden they start grunting and efforting with effort with each push. And the pushes aren't they're like more like quick, and then they're not as
quick and nothing there.
Yeah, they're not sustained
because they're not really using frames. It's like these last gasps, right?
Yeah, they're
last
kind
efforts.
of like momentum. Like they're trying to just get a little momentum to generate that. They don't have that.
Well, it comes from a panicky space.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not well thought out. It's just like, I gotta get out of this.
Yeah, last ditch. Last ditch. All right, Chewy, I got one more for you. And you brought up the great point of we talk about cooking your opponent. You talk about it. You've said it before. I try to implement it, and I can definitely I've used some of that where I just get in those positions. You've kind of showed me a few things, and it helps.
And you felt me do it to you.
100%. I feel you do it, and then I'm like, this sucks. I'm gonna do it to somebody else, and I'm gonna see how it feels. And I started, going through that whole process of learning. Obviously, I have you there, kind of giving me some guidance, but I'm also starting to figure out, I'm gonna push my shoulder here a little bit. I'm gonna move my weight up a little bit.
Right. And you can do this from other positions. It doesn't have to be just the one that I play, but it's like you start looking for it.
Sure.
You become aware of it.
Yeah. You try to find, I think, where they require the most for, because there's certain parts where people's hands are where they can frame a little more easily. But some of the stuff you're doing when they're a lot of times their shoulders are flat and even their hips are a little rotated, they don't have that nice spine alignment, and they can't really push as hard. It's like pushing with a curved spine, rotated spine. It feels terrible, first of all. And then when you start implementing head control and things like that, so you're taking that spine out of position, I think that's one thing too. So here's one more question I got. Where do you like to go from this position? Do you like to submit there, or do you like to go somewhere else? Do you like to, because you can transition obviously to mount and cook for mount. We've practiced that before, and that's miserable. But is there what's your kind of plan after that, after you've kind of cooked? Maybe you need points, or maybe you need a submission, whatever the rules of the tournament are. What do you like to do?
It really depends on the person, what they're giving me. You know what I mean? Because You can hold the chest to chest in different ways. You can do it sort of reverse style, like the arm scoop thing that I showed my arms race stuff. You can go direct, straightforward, chest to chest. There's a lot of different ways to hold it. But the two areas you typically are going to splinter off to is either side control or mount. You're typically going to go to one of those. I would say that most commonly, if I'm really focused on cooking and just eliminating movement, I'll go to mount. And I would tell you what's interesting is when I go around to seminars, I'll ask people, because like, you know, when I go to seminars, a lot of times if I do a seminar, like if I do a seminar at someone's gym specifically, what I like doing is doing a Friday open mat with the seminar on Saturday. And the reason the open mat is because then I get to roll with the person's gym. I can see what they do and I can tailor the seminar to them. I can say, okay, well, to me, they have this style. I'm not going to use this technique. I'm going to use this technique instead. I think this might be more useful to them. It allows me to, like, you know, make it more customized to them. So in an effort to do that, when I go to do my seminars or like one of my jiu-jitsu open seminars, that kind of thing, where like I'm with these people for one day, I'll ask people a series of questions that kind of help me get some read as to maybe how I can make this seminar and the material that I'm going to show better for them. And one of the questions I'll ask is, hey, I'll ask everybody what their main dominant position is. Like out of mount, back mount, side control, what do you feel best with? It's interesting. Very, very, very few people say mount. Almost everybody is unanimously side control or back mount. Like very few people like say, oh man, I love mount. Which is really interesting. And I used to be the same way. I used to be like, man, I freaking hate mount. Like I get to mount, I just lose it.
Yeah.
Maybe some of you guys listening to this are the same way. You get to mount, you lose it, right? So one of the big things with mount is the way that you hold it. So what a lot of people do is they will get to mount and they don't secure an underhook. So they get to mount, and then this person on the bottom has this nice straight spine position. They have both of their hands together. They're in a really good, strong pushing position. So even if they don't know very good jiu-jitsu, they can bench press, they can push, which again, against a strong person, that's a legitimate counter. But you take that arm away, you get an underhook, the position changes completely. And they go from being in like I feel okay, maybe a little uncomfortable because you're heavy, but I can escape to, oh crap, you have this isolated. I'm threatened by submissions and I can't escape because I can't build my frames.
Right.
So their next move usually is to have to get their arm free so they can come back to getting their frames together. And so like when you take that arm up there, and then if you know how to apply again, this idea of uneven pressure to mount, it becomes a awful position where again, I in the gym, I feel a certain level of like pity when I'm rolling with someone, and like I have to when I'm working on it because it's awful. Like we were in one, it was on a Friday session, and I was rolling with some of the guys, and again, these are tough dudes, and I sort of apologized after class. Hey guys, I'm just working on this to get ready for a competition. They're like, don't say sorry. Like we get it, but everybody noticed like, God, it's awful. Because if you know how to apply it, it's so direct. It's on the face, it's on the chest. Their breathing sucks. They can't get out of it. You take away their hips by getting a little higher. I mean, it's brutal. So I've really come to like mount because of the way that I use it now. And again, just like the passing style, you don't go, it's not a microwave. We're not going there to finish quick. We're there to cook them first. So you get there and you hold the position and you start to listen to their breathing. You'll start a lot of times, if you hold it just right, you'll hear this as they're trying to breathe against your chest and your body.
I hate it.
You know what I'm talking about? Like you get it where they're trying to breathe and they're just trying to get a little bit of air. And again, it's awful. And so I really like the position. I still love side control. Side control is one of my best positions. I know I heard, I've seen people say like, oh, side control is a waste of time. You know, it's just people like, you know, they have to take the contrarian view to get attention.
Yeah.
But like you can watch, there's guys like Shanji, who just recently submitted a very tough black belt at a who's number one with side control with the Kimura, right? It's a great position.
Sure it is.
And I love having a good side control game because it opens up back mount. It opens up a lot of submissions. You have arm locks, chokes, all kinds of stuff. But from this type of chest to chest passing, I would say that most often I tend to find myself in mount afterwards, which if you're talking about competition points, that's 3 for the pass, 4 for mount. In ADCC rules, I think that would be a 4-point move. It's considered a clean pass. And then for dominance sake, I mean, you're then able to cook the person and just put just awful pressure on them and hold them down.
Yeah, it's pretty awful. As far as when you're doing this chest to chest, is there anything that people can do to like make it a little more comfortable for themselves on bottom? I mean, I don't know if that's anything you
Yeah,
want to.
yeah. No, I mean, like if you can get your feet into the game. So,
Yeah.
for instance, like if I'm pressuring in, like let's say if we're starting in half guard knee shield, right? If you start framing with your arms and your knees, you can do that, but you're not going to get away from me. So typically what's better off is if the person gets both of those feet on the hips. This is where I have more trouble. So if they get both their feet on my hips and they push me away and then recenter and basically get back to a neutral position, that forces me to have to re-engage, and that gets them out of that position where I'm just laying on them.
Yeah.
Right. And then from there, they can try to start to get under the hips. That doesn't stop things, but the chest to chest, you do have to be really mindful about it, because if the person is really good at hip shoveling underneath,
like
for leg locks and stuff like that, you have to be really mindful of that, because you can get yourself into trouble there if you go for chest to chest, if you get too forward.
Right.
And then two is just simply if they get into other positions like a full guard or something else where I can't use it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And again, this kind of goes back to it, like fighting in the ground of your choosing, or making the person and disrupting their position, even making me fight to the other side. I tend to pass to my right. So if that person forces me back onto the other side, I'm good on both sides, but I'm better on the right. And so a lot of times it's one of those things where if they force me over to the side, like it's like, well, it puts a struggle on me.
Right.
One of the reasons why I pass to the right, by the way, for you guys, and I've talked about this a bunch, is I literally think this is like one of the simplest things you can do to make your guard passing better. Almost everybody plays half guard on their right side, which would be the top person's left. Most people play with their left arm top. Like if you're if you're only on your side from half guard, you play with your left arm top. There are rare exceptions the other way, but most of the time it's left arm top. So everybody's muscle memory, everybody's intuition, everybody's just sort of experience is on that side. So if you get really good at passing to the other side, it really throws a wrench into things for people. And I've had experiences where literally I'm passing both sides, and one side the guy feels like a black belt, and the other side is like a mediocre blue belt. And like, whoa, this is wild. And I've seen it multiple times where, I'm passing one side, switch right side, boom, off to the races,
Yeah, that's a very interesting concept, but that's something and we've talked about before, probably developing one side first and then transitioning to the other. But
I think you have to. I think you have to figure out, because you're gonna have to teach yourself on the other side, because you're basically in jiu-jitsu we develop a feeling.
Yeah.
So then you have to go to the other side and find that feeling over there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a great idea. It's such a way. It's almost like a way to double your moves, double your techniques essentially, and also make them more effective. Because we got some guys that are, but you're right. And I don't know why we naturally. It's almost like you turn yourself into a lefty. If you say most people are right-handed, lefty's not.
Yeah.
It's like you turn yourself into a left-handed grappler or something. I don't know. That would be the example, but that's interesting because I mean, it does work. I mean, it does work. You get people really uncomfortable in those positions.
Well, I mean, I find it all the time, even like, with our guys in the gym. It's like, man, I'll have so much trouble passing to one side, and then I'll switch and go to the other side. Easy, and I've had that experience plenty of times. And it's like sometimes people won't even realize what you're doing to them. The first time I came across that was back in 2005. There was a really big name gym that was competing at the Arnold Classic in Columbus, Ohio. And I listened to them after one of my matches where I went against the guy I lost. And afterwards I was listening to him, and they were talking about, they were forcing everybody into the right side, making them play half guard there. So again, this is like 2005, same stuff, right? Like this is nothing new. This is just simple stuff. But they were forcing everybody, and they were winning their matches, and they killed it by forcing right side half guard.
Yeah.
And then I remember like going against the guy, and I played half guard at the time as a blue belt, but I remember for whatever reason, when I was against this guy, I felt like I just didn't know what I was doing. And it was because he passed to my right side, the side I never used, and it literally will feel very different. Just think about this. Think about writing with your dominant hand, like, and then try to, and some people are ambidextrous, but that's the very few exceptions. And then take your other hand and try to write, or try to do anything, right? It's like, for most of us, like one arm's bigger than the other. I noticed that my left arm is actually bigger than my right. And I would think it'd be the opposite because my right is my dominant hand, but I was talking to Eli. He's like, well, when you carry in the groceries and you're trying to open the door and stuff, which one do you use for the blunt sort of just carrying stuff?
Sure.
I use my left. My right hand is more dexterous. It has more control. My left one's like, I can do simple stuff with it all day long. And so my arms have a bit of difference to them. And so again, even from a physical, like my body, physical, like the way I look, if you know what you're looking for, you will see physical differences there because of the asymmetricalness of just the choices I make on a daily basis to live. So then you get into your jiu-jitsu game and it's there, it's present. And again, it's one of these simple things. Like everybody's looking for these really complex, whatever. I like finding like this simple stuff that you can just simply work on, and it doesn't require a lot to change. And that's something you can do like right now. You want to make your guard passing game better. You want to make your bottom game better. Learn how to do whatever you do to your best side, to your other side, and see how it works. And again, give yourself a focus of like a month. See how that works after a month. Again, it's really powerful stuff. People don't do it because it's hard, because you have to go from saying, oh, like I can armbar Bob every time I roll with him, to now it's like, man, Bob's passing my guard because my armbar's failing.
Yeah.
Got to drop the ego. Got to play a little bit. It's hard to do. We just want to keep playing the games we're good at. But it's a really good tip for improving your guard passing game, your sweeping game, whatever.
Yeah.
Just general jiu-jitsu. But for the general takeaways for this stuff, I would say, if you're an older grappler, a couple things to chew on. One is, if you have any positions or techniques you naturally go to when you're tired, that's a good question to ask yourself. If you're super new, just sort of put that on the shelf and look at it later. But if you have a little bit of experience, just at least a couple of years, start asking yourself, like, where do I go when I just get tired? Where do I naturally gravitate towards? From top position, a really great position if you do not play with it currently, and if you do play with it currently, go into it, like double down on it, is chest to chest half guard. Forcing people into half guard. Find a lot of different ways to force people from half guard. Ignore all the other guards out there, and you can just get in there and force the chest to chest. It doesn't have to be the only position. I like using stack positions and everything too. I think stacking is a really good older person game as well. But I really like chest to chest half guard. And then you want to find positions. And again, you will find them in different places. But you have to be on the lookout for them. This is something just to kind of like always sort of keep your eye out for. Look for positions that force the opponent to support your weight with their body, their hands or arms, frames, whatever it is. So for instance, chest to chest, I'm laying on their body, chest to chest. Their weight is supported by both their face and their chest, which messes up their breathing. If we go to the knee shield and I start driving forward, their arms and frames are pushing away from me. They're supported there. In a stacking position, right? Like their weight, my weight is sitting right on top of them and they're supporting it. You're looking for those positions. I like those positions from top where you're making that person have to hold you. You feel them pressing away from you. Over under is another one. I'll get into an over under and I won't even use the over under sometimes to even really go for a pass. I'll just get the person pushing. And once I feel them pushing in, I'm like, I'm just going to sit here for a minute because they're pushing right now. They're using more energy than me. So let's hang back for a second. So you want to be on the lookout for those. When you feel people pushing on you, that's a good thing. You want that. That means like, okay, they're having to use more energy and you can kind of camp out there a little bit. And then you want to go back to what we talked about on the podcast. Learn to apply pressure unevenly. Again, we understand that we want our pressure on the person, not on the mats. Not elsewhere. We want the person on the pressure on the person. And so this is as simple as when you go into those positions, you really want to tune in to where do you feel the pressure? Like right now, wherever you are, whether you're driving your car, you're sitting at home, you're doing whatever, you have some sensation in your body of where your butt is sitting, where your feet are pressing into the ground, whatever, right? That sensation, tune into that. Where do you feel the earth, the ground, their body pushing into you? And then what you want to do is you want to turn it up onto the areas where it's pressing into their body, not excessively so. You're not trying to squeeze. You don't want to be like shaking, holding the pressure. You want to do so that you're applying a lot of pressure, but you're doing so relatively comfortably where you're not using a lot of muscle. You're just making sure that your weight is pressed into them, right? So if you're 200 pounds, that 200 pounds is disproportionately placed onto their body versus the mat. And then, one of the things I would encourage you guys to do if you're an older grappler is you want to find things and then focus on less. Jiu-jitsu is this overwhelming thing that you have in front of you. And a lot of times there's just endless complexity to it. And I would tell you sometimes I don't think it's necessary. Now, if you just want to go watch tons of hours of instructionals and stuff and YouTube videos, that's perfectly fine. But I would tell you, you probably would get a hell of a lot more from your training and your jiu-jitsu if you found some sort of simple thing that you were trying to work on. And then like when you rolled, you were just really focused on using that stuff. That's one of the reasons why I have that ebook that I give away on the website, the Focus Jiu-Jitsu ebook, is like, hey, let's get focused, because as an older grappler, you train less, you can't recover as fast, right? So you can't just go into the gym, you have more in your life going on. You just can't come into the gym 5 to 7 days a week. And if you could, you probably don't want to, because you don't want to get injured. So most older grapplers are typically coming in 2 to 3 days a week, maybe 4 or 5. Regardless, you want to get the most from your training, and you do that by being very focused and trying to master less stuff and like less areas and really develop this core competency. Again, this is what a lot of the greats do. They start to expand a little bit more than us, right? But if you're like your average jiu-jitsu person that's training like 2 to 3 days a week, you're not going to master everything in jiu-jitsu. So we want to be really focused on what we're doing there.
Yep.
And that's going to put people at a disadvantage when they're grappling with you.
Yeah, great points.
All right, guys. So thank you for being here. By the way, this sort of old man guard passing style, the whole reason I'm talking about it is because I've been working on mine for several years, as we talked about in the podcast. And then also I came up with a program. I call it the Flow and Controlled program. So it's a guard passing style that I use specifically for my old man game. I really enjoy it. I'm excited to share it because I've just noticed this as I travel and talk to you guys through email and everything else. Most of the people that follow me, I believe, are 30, getting close to 30 or older, right? It's just the crowd that I think I attract. We have more in common. Most of us were born closer to the 1900s, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth and we had corded phones and went to Blockbuster on Fridays, right? Like we can relate on things. And one of the things we can relate on is getting a little bit older. And so I created the program. It's a simple program. The methodology behind it, you could watch like the intro video in the program and know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. I also created an implementation guide with it, so that this way you can basically say, here are my objectives I should be working towards through my rolling. And then I even have a couple different packages if you're interested. And one of them includes group coaching that I'll be doing to help people get started, because a lot of times getting started is the hardest part.
Yep.
And so I wanted to create an option where if you want to be in like a group of like-minded people where we kind of come together for the month to get this thing going, to get started, then we can do that. If you guys are interested, the Flow and Controlled series is available on my website at chewjitsutraining.com. It'll be on the main page somewhere, but if you want to find the specific one, it's chewjitsutraining.com/old, OLD, what we are. And again, what it goes into is it's basically a jiu-jitsu style for guard passing and pressure to help you use less energy, rely less on cardio and, attributes, and more on structure, positioning to you work with people. It's gi or no gi transferable, right? If you want to play either or. For some of you guys that say, oh man, you can't slow down the no gi, like it slows it down. You can learn how to slow down the no-gi. It's possible. And likewise, if you play both like me, it works to both, because I'm not a gi or no-gi guy. I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. So I want to be able to play both. I don't like jiu-jitsu where I can only use it in one or the other. So it's transferable to both. So you can be effective in both. And again, it's been incredible for me. I would sort of say this with no hyperbole. It has in some ways reignited my excitement about jiu-jitsu, because again, as I said earlier in the podcast, it's not fun feeling yourself losing a step out of like your skills getting better. You're still training hard, but literally you're losing a step because you have more gray hairs. Kind of sucks. And it's only going to get worse, because like obviously Father Time remains undefeated. But it's nice being able to say, oh, look, I can get a little bit more effectiveness for myself, even as I get a little bit more, even if as I get older and I lose that step, I lose that energy, I lose that speed, I lose that cardio that I used to have, I can still become effective and be good in the mats, right? Now, again, there's always going to be a physical difference. It's just the reality of the game. If you're 70 years old and you're rolling with a 20-year-old world champion, well, then like they're probably going to roll nice with you anyway, but you're not going to be able to just really put it to that guy. But again, within reasonable situations, you can be more effective, use less energy, and again, do so in a very thoughtful and methodical way. So if you guys want to check it out, it's at my website, chewjitsutraining.com/old, OLD. And hope you guys enjoy it. Right now, at the time of recording this, or the time of releasing this, we are starting the launch on Friday, probably. Might change it a little bit. I still have to, because a couple of the packages will have some physical books and stuff to give you guys, some goodies that I wanted to do. Will probably be on Friday the 9th, May 9th, for Friday 2025. But if you go to that website, you'll see it, and you guys can check it out. But again, hopefully you guys enjoyed the podcast. And again, check out the program, Flow and Control, if you want to get more details on how to do what I was talking about in this podcast and learn all the ins and outs about it and learn a very simple system that isn't super complicated, and you can start immediately implementing into your jiu-jitsu game, your next role, because it is that simple. Just it's going to require some training. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. You can check them out at athletic.com. ATHLETHC. Had to look it up on the board. I was like, I'm having trouble. Again, they make THC and CBD mints that are microdosed with the THC. So you're not going to take these and get, blitzed and crazy and, have crazy whatever effects that THC gives you at high dosages. This is more of, you take it, it's for your everyday use. You can take it and it can help you with everything from, feeling a little bit more relaxed so we can get into a more, nice calm state for rest, or getting into a more relaxed state for a flow state when we're training. And they also have a blend that is used for exercise that has some other cannabinoids that are used, and they taste really good. Surprisingly, I thought it was going to be kind of nasty, but they actually taste
awesome.
They taste like mints. So again, try them out. I like the product. Again, I used them for probably about a month and a half before we ever endorsed them, because I wanted to make sure that I kind of enjoyed them. And again, microdose THC mints, no crazy effects. You'll enjoy the effects afterwards. And then again, you can check them out at Athletic, ATHLETHC.com. The promo code is Chewjitsu10. Big thanks to Epic Roll and the crew over there. Been a long time sponsor. They make some great jiu-jitsu gear. If you're someone that's just wanting to get some new gear and you want to check it out, I get a lot of my stuff made through them because they do such a good job. And again, if you want to check them out, it's epicroll.com, epicrollbjj.com, pardon. And you can check them out, and their promo code is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order on whatever you buy, whether it's a gi, rash guard, shorts, joggers, whatever it is. But great stuff over there. Check them out. Also, guys, if you want to support the podcast, check out Charlotte's Web. They are one of the premier CBD companies out there. They've been around for a long time. They make other products using different cannabinoids, such as CBN, to help support sleep. They also have a lot of new products that use things like functional mushrooms and dietary supplements to help everything from have more focus to deal with stress and help you relax more, all these different things, which again, a lot of us, that's the thing we're trying to do. We're trying to get more focus, but at the same time, when it's time to rest, we want to have that relaxation. And so they have different products to help you do that. You can check them out at charlesweb.com. The promo code is Chewjitsu30 for 30% off the order. If you want to support the podcast directly, check us out at Patreon, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. There's a bunch of different perks you get from it. Everything from some warm-up routines for specifically to jiu-jitsu, to recordings that we have, podcast extras, content that hasn't been released anywhere else. And you support the podcast for a very inexpensive price. You can check out the details and all the perks at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And guys, as I plugged it earlier in the podcast, if you want to check out my Focus Jiu-Jitsu ebook and you want to add more focus to your training, it's a good idea. You can go to my website at chewjitsu.net/join. When you go to that website, you put in your name and info. I will send you an ebook in the email, and then I'll send you a video that you can get access to. When you get that information, the ebook and the video, go through it, and it will give you 12 different strategies, more than 12, but 12 main strategies on how to add some focus to your training. And it's stuff that you can do everything from white belt to black belt. This is stuff I do to this day. They're all simple strategies, right? I like the simple stuff. I don't need complicated stuff. I think that a lot of times the simplest stuff works the best. I think that sometimes people have unnecessary complexity to things. You can get so much from your training by just being a little bit more intentional with how you go about it. You can also blast through training plateaus and those feelings of, am I getting better? Right? A lot of people say, am I getting better? I feel like I'm getting worse. Well, it's like, how do you know you're getting worse? How do you know you're getting better? Because you submitted someone? That's not a good measure, right? We want to have clear goals that we're after. And that's really how you know where you're going in this thing. Imagine, if you were traveling by a car and you didn't have a address you were going to, you might be putting a lot of miles on those tires, but you don't know if you're even going in the right direction.
That's right.
Right. So you want to have a clear direction for your game. And again, it can be as simple as simply looking through the ebook, finding the different areas, that one that strikes your fancy, you're like, that's it. And then go in that direction. And again, you can get that at my website at chewjitsu.net/join. So guys, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you all. You know, I know today was like an older grappler episode, which is most of our people, but if we have some younger grapplers on the podcast, listen, this is efficiency. What we're really getting at is efficiency. And efficiency is great for everyone, not just old grapplers. For us, it becomes a necessity. We have to do it. Otherwise, we can't hang on the mats anymore. For you guys, if you're younger, then you can kind of bounce around and you have the choice. But I would tell you, you still want to have that game in the mix. You want to be able to slow things down and lock things down and have that ability for really, really well applied pressure, and a thing where you can slow the game down. It's really, really useful at any age. But again, for us as older grapplers, we have to. There's no way around it. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you all, and we'll talk to you next time.